We're doing Tanya with Hashem's help. And we're learning Perek Yates. We learned about Kedusha. So in Tanya Perek Vav, a long time ago, the Alter Rebbe interpreted that Kedusha is bittul. That's what he says. Right? What's the difference between Kedusha and Klipa? Klipa, the center of Klipa is self. The center of Kedusha is the Eibishter. Kol masha batal letzla yizbarach. For Sada Kedusha eine ela mash kol masha batal letzla yizbarach. I guess I'll share this with you. I've shared it with you so many times in the past. I'm actually writing a book. When it comes out, you'll know that I wrote a book. So don't get excited just yet. So one of the things that I wrote was something that we learn here, that there's Torah b'shamayim and there's Torah ba'aretz. There's a Torah on earth and there's Torah in the heaven. What is the difference? Torah on earth divides reality into three categories: choiv, isir, rishus. What you have to do, that means mitzvahs. What you're not allowed to do, that means avedas. And then do whatever you want. And when you look at the world, most of the world, the highest percentage of the world is in that third category. It's not a choiv, it's not something that you have to do. It's not an isser, it's not something that you're not allowed to do. It's a just do as you wish. But when you go to a higher level, Torah as it is Bashamayim, or what we call Primis HaTorah, Soid, you discover that there's no middle. Why? Because Kedusha is called Masha Batal, let's say, is Barach, Kedusha is Bittel. And not Bittel is automatically Sitra Achar. I mean, we learned Perek Vav so many years ago, I don't even remember. I'm not going to ask you, do you remember, But that's the way it goes. Kedusha is Bittel. And if it's not bittul, it's the opposite of bittul. It's sitra achra, it's the other side. So is it bad if something is not bittul to the Eibush? If something is selfish, it's bad? So when I taught it to you way back then, Perek Vav, I used the word tumah. The Alter Rebbe uses the word tumah. You don't want to call it bad, don't call it bad. But it's not tahara, it's tameh. It's not, if it's not connected, then it's tameh. And this is really the standard of the Tanya, which is Pnimiyas HaTorah. It is Torah b'shamayim, that Kedusha is bittul, and if it's not bittul, then it's the opposite of bittul. This was Tanya Perek Vav. This was, Tafshinai and Zayin. I don't know when we learned it. In our Perek, chapter 19, we had a new dimension. And the new dimension is Mesiras Nefesh. Not only is Kedusha bittul, but Kedusha is Chochmah. Chochmah means it's prepared to lose its own mitzias, its own form, and become one with the Eibishter. And even in its source, when it goes back to its source, it's also going to be bottle. This is the nature of Kedusha, that it wants to give itself to its source at the expense of its own self. So these are two steps. Bittul is one step, and I guess we'll use the words Mesiras Nefesh. It's kind of hard to use the word Mesiras Nefesh about a candle, but about a neshama, you can say Mesiras Nefesh. And the Alter Rebbe says, V'chein hu b'chol sita de Kedusha. This is the rule, not just in the neshama. Anything which is in the tzad Kedusha has these criteria. And then the Alter Rebbe adds a third idea, which is what we talked about last week, and a little bit the week before then. And that is, in addition to Kedusha being bottle, in addition to Kedusha having this readiness to lose itself in its source, and even though it's going to lose its mitzvahs completely, there's a third criteria, and that is that Kedusha is called Chayas. Yamuso v'lei b'chochma. He brought two psukim, remember? It's a few lines from the bottom of page 48. HaChochma t'chaya, Yamuso v'lei b'chochma. Okay, so Kedusha is living. So last Sunday we talked about the definition of life. And the definition of life is immortal. To be considered living means you have to be living forever. If you remember last week's class, I talked to you about Mark Twain's piece, The Jew. What is the secret to his immortality? And the answer is, the secret to his immortality is not his intelligence. It's not his sensitivity. It's not his skill. It's not his perseverance. It's his connection to Atzmos U'Mosei Baruch Hu. The secret of his immortality is his, not him. That's what the secret is. His connection to the Eibishter. Now, Klipa is the opposite of all of those three things. Klipa is the opposite of bittul. Klipa doesn't have to be bad. Klipa doesn't even have to be, a fully preoccupied yesh. Klipa means selfish. And there's a psychiatrist that I learned Tanya with for many years, an internal locus of control rather than an external locus of control. My reality comes from me. Right? At Fabrengenischen, after the right amount of l'chaim is in the proper nigudim, ani v'yafseyeh, the center of the universe is myself, and in that space there's nobody but me. That's klipa, not bittul. Obviously, if something is klipa, not bittul, it doesn't want to sacrifice itself to Hashem and lose its metzias. Fakert, have haliteini. It's all about me. Give me. Pour it down my throat. If you remember my bottom of the Friedrich Rebbe, I was a little boy when I learned this Maimorim. I wish I would learn this Maimorim now, but when I was a little boy, 13 years old, I remember Rabbi Goldstein, Yosef Goldstein, Shabbos afternoon, we would go to his house and he would teach us, Ulaluka shtei bones, have. Luka means a piafke. And the leech has 2 daughters, and their names are have. Give me. That's the source of this. It's a pasuk. Ulaluka shtei bones, have. The truth of klipa is self-centricity, and again, klipa's noiga is klipa. Klipas noiga is not rois or tmeyas lagamri. It's not totally evil, meaning it's redeemable, it can be corrected, but in its present state, it's klipa, that it doesn't have bittul, it doesn't want to sacrifice itself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the center of itself is itself, and the way it stands now, it's not living. So the first characteristic of klipa is a lack of bittul, Tanya chapter 6. The second characteristic of klipa is a lack of readiness to give itself away to its source. In other words, a selfishness, which leads to the third characteristic of klipa, that b'chayeyim kruyim meis, that even while it's alive, it's death. The shoyim b'chayeyim kruyim meis, it's mentioned in Tanya Perek Yudzayin, and here, tzadikim b'misosam kruyim chayim, tzadikim when they're dead, they're still considered alive. Kamei shekosef u'b'neyahu ben yeyoda ben ish chay. It's the Rashi in the end of Pashas Noach by Terach. But Yomas Terach was a Rosh. Tzadikim b'chayeyim kruyim b'misosam kruyim chayim. Tzadikim live forever. Why? Because even when the guf goes away, since their whole reality was their connection to Atzmos Musa Tzad Baruch Hu, and the Eibush that doesn't die, so whatever is connected to the Eibush that also doesn't die, and that's one of the basic explanations for Tchias HaMeis. Because something which is living shouldn't die. Temporarily it's interrupted, but then it comes back and lives forever because it was always living. Now, but then the body was missing. And in Klipa it's called Misa. Klipa is called Misa. Misa means death. Even when it's living, it's death. So those are the 3 characteristics of Klipa. Not bittul, self-centricity, and Yamusav alei b'chochma. When one lacks chochma and one lacks bittul, they're in a maimed matzav of Misa. And there's one more characteristic that I want to add to this conversation. We read it last week. We're going to read it again this week. But I'm going to first discuss it and then read it. Okay, so if you like to put things in neat boxes, you have so far 3 lines. Here it says Kedusha, here it says Klipa. 1, 2, 3. Line number 1, bittul and not bittul. Number 2, ready for sacrifice, not ready for sacrifice. Number 3, life or death. Now comes characteristic number 4. And the 4th characteristic is free or enslaved. The 4th characteristic of Klipa, of Kedusha, is Cheiros, is freedom. And the 4th characteristic of Klipa is Golos, is exile. And this is mystically very profound and psychologically very obvious. In other words, in Kabbalah words, it's very deep. But in Avodah words, in life words, this is literally what we all deal with. And again, this is so basic, and we talk about this so often. We go over this topic pam acharei pam, but you have to go over it pam achar pam, right? Every day we daven. I also daven every day. Yeah? I'm not going to say that every day my davening has all the kavanas, but every day we daven. And one of the facts of davening is that we constantly refer back to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim comes up again and again in our davening. The first, I guess the most significant place where Yetzias Mitzrayim comes up in our davening is the end of Shema. Right? Vayemer Hashem al Moshe leimer. And the women are saying, why am I reading about tzitzis? They said, I'm not allowed to wear tzitzis. I can sit in a sukkah, I can shake a lulav, I can eat a matzah, I can make kiddush, I can make havdalah, but I can't wear talis, whatever the reasons are. So why am I saying tzitzis? And the answer is, Ani Hashem Elokecha Mishayitzesi Yescha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. In fact, when a man says tzitzis at night, for the tzitzis is Laila's lavman tzitzis. There's no tzitzis is not tzitzis has to be seen. And when it's dark and you can't see, you're potter from tzitzis. So by night there's no mitzvah of tzitzis. There's a minik to wear tzitzis, but there's no din, not a deiraisa, not a derabanan. So why are we saying tzitzis at night? And if cancer is, we're saying tzitzis because of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And of course, after we say Vayomer, Shachris and Ma'ariv, then we say Emes ve'yatziv ve'nochin ve'kayam ve'yosher hadover. And at night we say Emes ve'emunah, Emes ve'yatziv and Emes ve'emunah. And in the last brach of Kriyas Shema, right, the Chazal say, Sheva b'yemil al ticha, there's 7 brachas of Krishma, 3 in the morning, 4 at night. The third bracha that we say of Krishma in the morning, and the third of 4 brachas that we say in Krishma at night, the fourth bracha of Krishma at night is called Hashkivenu. It's about Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's about the Exodus. And we say every day, Sheish Sechiris, Laman, Tiske, the same Tzeischam, Eret Mitzrayim, Kel Yemecha Yecha. You're supposed to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why do you have to constantly talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim? And of course, the simple and yeshivish answer to the question is because Hashem said, you need a reason. If Hashem says chop wood, you'll chop wood. Hashem says remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, so you have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. But Chassidus always asks why. Not Chas v'Shalom that Chassidus is asking why, that if he's not going to know an answer, he's not going to do it. But Chassidus wants to know a time. And the answer is because Yetzias Mitzrayim is not a story that's in history. Yetzias Mitzrayim is a regular phenomenon that we all deal with. Because we all deal with Mitzrayim, Meit Saragvul. We all deal with enslavement, with incarceration, with inhibition, with suppression. These are all nice words, but they're very serious words. And in plain English it means, I'm not going to say all of us, but I'll say some of us. Some of us have a hard time doing what we want to do. What we want to do, not what somebody else wants us. Some of us have a hard doing what we want to do. Some of us have a hard time stopping ourselves from doing what we don't want to do. So I want to do something, why can't I do it? If I want to not do something, why can't I stop myself? And the one word answer is Mitzrayim. I'm a prisoner. I'm stuck. I'm incarcerated. How did I become a prisoner? So there's different answers, but the answer that's most important is I've become a prisoner through bad habits. I become a prisoner by giving away my freedom. I become a prisoner by doing the wrong thing so many times that when I want to do the right thing, I can't. I become a prisoner because when I've done the wrong thing so many times that I want to stop myself from doing, I cannot. It's called golus. Golus means a loss of self-control. A person has a problem with eating. My doctor told me if I don't change my eating habits, he's putting me on medication for arichas yom v'shenem tevis for the rest of my life. So now I got the message. Al teichel tznein. So you don't listen. Al teichel tznein. Shalei dat kamesh dat lepleni. So then you hear it a little different. Yeah, so you have to stop eating and eating at different times and eating at different foods, and of course the most important thing, eating in different amounts. Yeah, but you're so used to eating bad. You're so used to eating the wrong food. You're so used to eating too quickly. You're so used to eating in the middle of the night. You're so used to eating too much. And the doctor says, Al teichel tznein. How do you stop? This is called Mitzrayim. It's called exile. It's called trapped. It's called golus. A loss of self-control. Now, some of that is, the Eibishter created us with some limitations. But practically speaking in our lives, most of that is what we did to ourselves. These are bad habits that we imposed upon ourselves, that we brought into ourselves, and then we wake up one fine day and we say, you know what, from now on, I want to change my habit. We have a very hard time, or it becomes impossible for us to change these habits because we've golosed ourselves. So if you say, so how come we have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim so many times in the day? The answer is, we're not saying it enough times. We shouldn't say it twice a day, once in the morning and once at night and once after Shachris. We should say it every hour. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim is not a story, it's not a history, it's me, my life today, here and now. What is it? I have mitzarim gvulim, limitations. Now the best kind of limitations is because I haven't yet broken those limitations. But the worst kind of limitations is limitations that I added to my own being through poor choices. Poor choices in doing things I shouldn't do. poor choices and not doing things that are not good for me to do, and now I want to change, and it's very hard. This is called golus. This is called golus. It's called exile. So Hasidus argues. So you got the avoid. I mean, the avoid, everybody hears. The word is at any time, any person regains control over one thing in his life, which he or she has corrupted through bad habits. The bad habit is a mitzrayim. The healing, the remedying, the reversal of that bad habit is called Yetzias Mitzrayim, and there's nothing in the world like it. The experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the feeling of gaining control over a piece of yourself where you had no control. I mean, I can give you the stupidest examples, but none of these are stupid. If a person has a bad habit of talking in shul, and he's machlit one day, ich will in shul nicht reden. I'm not talking in shul, I'm not talking in Kaddish, I'm not talking in Charizar Sashatz, I'm not talking in Tateda. And he stops himself. That is called Exodus. It's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now you say, what's the big deal? It's almost embarrassing to say that this is your accomplishment, but this is what the word avoida means. To take ourselves out of one more Meitzar Gvul. And we have no shortage of Mitzrayims. A person, none of us is running out of things to correct, to heal, to remedy, to exit from Larichas Yameinu, Tevet Shaneinu. We all have so many Mitzrayim that we need to exit. And when we go out of such a golus, it's called Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Alter Rebbe argues, Chassidus argues, that the difference between Kedusha and Klipa is this. Klipa means I'm in a golus and I can't help myself. I can't help myself. In the Lashon HaGemara, Ein chavush mater es atzmem yibeis or asurim. A prisoner cannot redeem himself from his own exile. So when I have a Mitzrayim, if I am still in a position to take myself out of this Mitzrayim, I should talk with my eyes closed, Efshet. If I'm in a Mitzrayim, and I'm in a position to take myself out of Mitzrayim, that's not yet Golus, it's Noiga. It's Noiga. It's Klipa. But so long that I'm in a position to redeeming that klipa, if I'm stuck, I've developed a bad habit of talking in shul. I've the bad habit that when I see this and this person, I have to say something insulting. If I could still fix that, it's a golus, but I own the key. When a person crosses over from a mitzrayim that they could remedy to a mitzrayim that they cannot remedy, they've gone over from klipas nega to shalosh klipas at mezagabi. The fourth characteristic of klipa is I have no control. I can't help it, and it's called golus. And in the language of the Gemara, ein chavush mater es atzmi beis asurim. When a prisoner loses control of himself, and they call it in today's world, they call it addiction, and they call it a disease. There's a lot of debate amongst Rabbanim, and there's certainly debate amongst Mashpiyim. There's a Yid who I respect till the sky. And so I was trying to explain to him what addiction means, and he got very upset at me. He said, they just need a little kuntas amayin. And he wouldn't accept that the kuntas amayin is not going to work. He was very upset that the pazet, there was something wrong with my chassidishkeit. And believe me, I know there's plenty wrong with my chassidishkeit, because I'm saying that there's a concept of a human being who's lost control, but the emes is that's what says in Tanya. Shalosh klipas atmeyas lagamri means a loss of self-control. If I want to correct it, I cannot. Any mitzrayim, whether it's God-given or it's man-imposed, if I am still able to redeem myself from that mitzrayim, it's not a full golus. It's a golus on the surface. It becomes full golus when I'm not able to redeem myself. So now let's make our list. Go back to our blackboard. So you have on one side you have Kedusha, on the other side you have Klipa. By Kedusha we have 4 characteristics now. Characteristic number 1, Bittul. Characteristic number 2, we'll call it for lack of words, Mesidus Nefesh. Characteristic number 3, living. And characteristic number 4, free. Ben Chayrin. I have an uncle, he's unfortunately Elam Emes. A Litvish, a Chassidish Nishkel Lubavitcher. He was a misnagid, but he was a beautiful Jew, really beautiful Jew. So I was once with him someplace, and we were talking about this, Shleasani Goy, Shleasani Ovid, Shleasani Isha. And the question that we were discussing is why we say it negative. Why don't you say it positive? Shasani Yehudi. So I said Shasani Chofshi. He got really upset. Chofshi means fly. Shasani ben Choyden. And he's right. In Chumash steht Lachofshi Yishalchenu by Evet Knaini, by Nevedivin. It also says Lachofshi. See, in the modern world for sure, and maybe even Lashon Torah, Chofshi means fly ben Choyden. So the fourth thing you're going to put on the list of Kedusha characteristic is Ben Choyden, free. Free means I own me. Free means that if I want to grow, I have the power to. It takes work, but I could do it. Free means that even if Chas v'Sholom there's a Mitzrayim, whether the Eibishter gave me that Mitzrayim in my personality, in my nature, in my environment, or I, God forbid, brought that Mitzrayim onto myself, so long as I'm in a position to be Meshachrer, to redeem, to emancipate myself from that Golus, it's still possibly Kiddush. It's Klippas Neiga. What are the four characteristics of Klippa? The four characteristics of Klippa are no bittul, no mesiras nefesh, self-centrism, misa, and Golus. Klippa is stuck. Klippa cannot redeem itself. And a boy said, this is the pshat, Avedis Abirudim. This is the idea of Avedis Abirudim. Avedis Abirudim means the Eibishter comes to us, Jewish people, and says, I am giving you sparks of Elokus that are in Golus. I'm giving you sparks of me that are stuck. They cannot redeem themselves. But you could. If a state. That's the type of Eibishter. This is the pshat. The Eibishter comes to you and he says, listen, here's food. This food is klipas nega. This food cannot redeem itself. You eat it, l'shem shamayim, you give it an aliyah. And even Shalosh Kibbutz at Meis Lagami, it says in Chassidus that when a person encounters something which is asur, and he doesn't partake of it, so shirasan zui takanosan, by not allowing himself to fall into the temptation to do this thing which is in the category of Aveda, he kills the Klippa, and when he kills the Klippa, the evil in the Klippa dies, and the good in the Klippa is redeemed and goes back to Kedusha. So we were given this task because, so to speak, these creations, these entities cannot do it for themselves. This is Klippa. What are we going to learn now? We're going to learn now that a Yid is unusual. In other words, we are creating a imaginary board, a whiteboard, a blackboard, a computer fancy board, which I don't know how to use yet, right? The way that everything is on the projector nowadays. Where in one column it says Kedusha, Bittul, Mesiras, Nefesh, Chayis, and Chedus. And the other column it says Klippa, Yeshus, and not Mesiras Nefesh, and Misa, and Golus. Now we're going to introduce ourselves to a new idea. To a being that is both a Ben Chedin and in Golus at the same time. And that's a Jew. There's nothing else like this. A Yid could be in Golus, and yet at the same time potentially a Ben Chedin. Nothing else in the creation can be in those two spaces at the same time. So let's go to the text, and let's do a little bit of learning. And we're going to begin on Daf Chavdal Lamed Beis, that means page 48, 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Okay? And I'm going to present it to you this way. We did an expose on Kedusha. We talked about Kedusha. We did a much shorter expose, Mamash Apor Shuris, literally a few lines, on Klippa. How many lines was it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. From the word Hepach Mamish. Vu Hepach Mamish, Bechinas HaKlippa. And in each of these two categories, we had 3 characteristics that we talked out. And the 4th characteristic, which I told you preemptively, I told it to you as a Hakdama to what we're going to learn now. Okay, so now we're going to learn inside, please. V'chein, the same is also true. Hareshoyim v'peisha Yisrael. Reshoyim means evil Jews, which is a terrible category. Peisha Yisrael means sinful Jews, which is also a terrible category. What's the difference between the Rosha and the Peisha Yisrael? They're both very bad. But look at these next words. Koidim shabo lidei nisayin, before they come to a test. Lekadesh Hashem, to sanctify the name of God, to be Makadesh Shem Shamayim, their Klippa. Klippa means what? No bittul, no mesiras nefesh, Misa and Chayim. And as you'll see momentarily, they have no control, they're enslaved. Key, and the reason is, because Bechinas HaChochma Shebenefesh Alekis, the spark of Chochma which is in their divine soul, If needs it's a lakus made in safe baruch with the spark of Hashem from main safe, hamalubish which is in their chachma. Here is the key word: hein bebechinas golus. They find themselves in a state of exile, benefesh habahamis, in their animal soul. Mitada klipa, it comes from klipa. Shebecholol asmolu shebelev, which is in the left ventricle of the heart. Hamayleches, which kings, umaysheles, and dominates. Begufam, in their bodies, beside, according to the mystical secret of Golus Hashchina, the Shechina being exiled. Canal that discussed earlier is in chapter 17. The Alter Rebbe talks Golus Hashchina. Golus Hashchina, what's Golus Hashchina? There was once upon a time a Beis HaMikdash. When the Beis HaMikdash stood, the Gemara says, Mishkan the Ikri Mikdash, Mikdash the Ikri Mishkan. There are two houses of God. One is called the Mishkan, and the other is called the Mikdash. So the Gemara, what you told, the Mishkan is also a Mikdash, and the Mikdash is also a Mishkan. What does that mean? Mishkan means a place for the Shechina. Mikdash means a place for Kedusha. Shechina and Kedusha are two levels. Shechina is the lower level, that's the godliness which manifests. Kedusha is the higher level, that's the level which hovers. And when things are al tilam, when things are the way they're supposed to be, so the Mishkan has the Shechina sitting in it, and because the Mishkan has the Shechina sitting in it, the Kedusha hovers. And the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan, each one is really both. What happens when the Beis HaMikdash, which is really the Mishkan, is destroyed? So the Kedusha departs, the Kedusha goes away. Golus HaShechina means the Eibishter finds himself in a situation where the Eibishter cannot help himself. Now, can you ever say about the Eibishter he can't? There's no such concept. You can never say about the Eibishter he can't. But that's how it goes. The Eibishter conditions himself that Kvayachol he can't. Of course Hashem can do whatever he wants. But the Eibishter created an environment, so to speak, where he's trapped. It's called Golus HaShechina. You understand? This is Golus. And again, Golus HaShechina is a bad thing for Shechina, but Golus HaShechina is a terrific thing for us, because that means the Eibush is with us in Golus. So it says in Svarim that just like there's a concept of Golus HaShechina by the Eibush, there's Golus HaShechina by a Neshama. And just like by the Eibush, the Taich Golus HaShechina is HaKvayachal, Hashem has lost control. That's the meaning of the word Golus in plain English. The meaning of Golus is being in jail, and the jail cell is locked, but there's one more rule: that you don't have the key. If you're sitting in jail and the jail cell is locked, but you're holding the key, you're not a slave. You're not in Golus. Golus means the key belongs to somebody else. You cannot help yourself. So there's a mystical concept of the Eibishter being in Golus Kvayachol, Golus HaShechina, and the Alter Rebbe is saying just as there's Golus HaShechina, there's Golus of the Neshama. What he calls the Chochma, with the need to tzevein safe, is in Golus. Golus means the way I stand right now, I am not a balabayas over me. Why? Because of what I did yesterday. Because I'm a Rosh Peish Yisrael. I made a lot of mistakes. I made so many mistakes that I became labeled, right? What do they say in America? Thou shalt not judge. I became labeled a Rasha. I became labeled a Peish Yisrael. And it's not just a label that was given me by somebody at a Fabring and Arta Al-Chayim. It's the Eibush gave me that label. And my matzav as I stand right now is that I have no self-control. Now that makes sense, right? Klipa means Golus. Klipa means a loss of self-control. A Jew who does an Aveda has a loss of self-control. What's the problem? The problem is, just like Golus HaShechina by the Eibishter is a weird concept. Why? Because you can never say about the Eibishter he has no self-control. You can just say he's decided to forfeit his control. Why are you talking about a Yid? A Yid is a Lakus. A Yid has a Yechidah Shebenefesh. A Yid is one with the Eibishter. So what is the pshat by a Yid? Golus HaShechina. So you can't say the pshat that the Yid is really the Yid is free, but he's choosing to be enslaved. By Yid is a little different. It's Kedim Shaboli Dei Niseyin B'Dvar Emunah by the Shem Echad. Let's keep reading. It says the Rebbe V'Lachein, therefore Nikra Ahavazu. Since it's possible for a Yid who has a Nefesh Elokis, and in the Nefesh Elokis there's Chochma, and in the Chochma there's Ein Seif. And because of the Ein Seif which is in the Chochma, we learned in the previous Pedic that it's Kedusha, and that it's Bittul, and that it's a readiness for Mesiras Nefesh. But because this person has done Averis, and they become a Rosh Hashanah Yisrael, meaning to say that as they stand right now, their neshama is in Golus, Nikras Ahav Azu B'Nefesh Alakis, this love in the divine soul, which is Sheretzeina V'Chefza, its want and its desire, L'dalik by the Shem, to become attached to the Eibishter, Chaye Chayim Baruch Hu, the source of life for all living things, is called B'Shem Ava Misuteres. It's called the hidden love. You never say that because a Yid is Golust, he lost his Ava Misuteres. You only say that because a Yid is Golust, his Ava Misuteres is Mustad, means unavailable to him, and he explains it. Ki Misuteres, because it's blocked. U'mechusen, it's covered over, b'levush sak, in a garment which is like a sack, which is the trademark of Klippa. B'peisha Yisrael, and Jewish people who are sinners. U'mimena, and because of this, okay, we'll get to the Mimena in a moment. What's the dead head? What's the dead head? Let's go to the mashal, right? The levush sak is a classic mashal in Chassidus. It's based on Kabbalah, but Chassidus flushes it out, and Chassidus explains it as best Chassidus, the way Chassidus knows how to explain it. Yeah, you bought material. The material doesn't have to be burlap or denim; it could be silk, but it's a raw piece of material. And you take the material to the tailor, and you say to the tailor, "Make me an outfit." So the tailor is going to take this material, and he or she is going to cut out the shape of the body and the hands and the feet to allow for mobility, right? What if you come to the tailor with this material and say, make me an outfit that I should be able to go into, and the tailor takes the outfit, the material, and just sews the edges and makes a bag and says, climb into the bag. Say, wait a minute, I can't move my hands, I can't move my feet, but it's an outfit. It's also a lavush. I can go inside it, I can wear it, but I become inhibited. The Rebbe said, "Verpluntet." I become inhibited. I become stuck. I become entrapped within the parameters of that beged because it's not tailored midei vad. It's not made to fit me. It's not my size. It doesn't give me free mobility. That's the mashal of klipa. The mashal of klipa is I'm wearing an outfit. If the outfit was cut properly, it would give me good mobility, and it would express me and all the other things to say about the levushim, the malyuso, the gresa, and so on and so forth. But when I have a levush sak, I'm trapped. Here's a yid with the nitzos, a part of the shama called chachma. In the chachma there's ein seif, which we call kedusha, and all the other good things that about, including mesidus nefesh. But he's the Rosh of the Peish Yisrael. So his nitzutz is in Golus. He lost control over his nitzutz. And the mashal for losing control over the nitzutz says that the shirt that he's wearing is not made to his size, it's a levush sak. So we're not saying he lost the Avram Meseteres, right? Just like by the Eibush, you're never going to say about Golos Hashchina that Golos Hashchina Geva Nois Eibush. He's always a balabas. No, but then this is the situation. So by a neshama, it's a bit different. You're never going to say, you're not going to say that the neshama, if she wants, she can go out of her imprisonment, because if she wants, you can go out of her imprisonment, then she's not imprisoned. But you're not going to say that it stops loving the Eibishter. You're simply going to say that it cannot access the love for the Eibishter. Now, why does that make sense? Klipa also has a love for the Eibishter, but we call it Klipa because they can't access it. Why by a Yid who's a Rosh and a Peish Yisrael, if he or she is in a Maimed Matzav of his Nitzitz Alakiz and a Vush Sok, why don't you say the love is gone, rather than say that the love is hidden? And there's an answer, a very important answer. And we're going to keep reading, okay? Umimena, and from her, nichnas behem ruach shtus, that's the source of the ruach shtus. Lachte to do an aveda, Kamay Merazal, the Gemara says, Ein adam chete v'chulu, a person does not do an aveda, elim kei nichnas be ruach shtus. How could a Jew do an aveda? It's hepech the teva of his nefesh abamis, and the answer is, this is called golus. And there's a whole process of how golus develops. We're going to leave that process alone. In other words, this line I'm not explaining, at least not right now, because I want to move on to the next line. It says the Rebbe Ella. Never then, only. Or to say it in other words, the reason by a Yid who's a Rosha, we do not say that he's Klipa. We say that his Ava is Musuteres, that he has a love for the Eibush, that the love is so covered over that it's called Golus. But we still attribute the love to him. Why? Just like by the Eibishter. We say Golus HaShechina. We don't say that Shechina Geva Nois Shechina. Golus Hashchina. But by the Eibishter we understand Golus Hashchina. Because by the Eibishter, Golus Hashchina is a choice. He subjects himself to our bechira, to our choices. So he says, I can't go out of my own situation, it's up to you. Not because he can't, but because he's chosen not to. How do you explain that by a Yid? By a Yid you cannot say he lost control and he still has control. So the Alter Rebbe answers, Shegolus Hazeh, the idea that by a Yid, his Chochmah and the Nitzitz Eliki, which is Ein Seif, which rests in his Chochmah, is in a state of Chochmah. Instead of Golus, Lebechinas Chochmah, the level of Chochmah, which we're calling exile. And again, the real translation of the word exile means I have lost self-control. Not I've lost self-control and it's hard for me to fix. I have lost self-control and kvayachol, it's impossible for me to fix. It's those levels of Chochmah and the Ein Seif which rests in the Chochmah, ha-mispashetes mimena benefesh kula, that radiates, to the soul as a whole, that means to the rest of the body, the arms, the leg, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the spleen. To give it life. Aval, as opposed to. And the base, the core, the essence. Shel bechinas ha-chochmah. From the idea that a Jew has chochmah. Shel benefesh elokis, which is in the divine soul. And that Ein Seif is resting in that pintel of chochmah. Says the Rebbe hu b'meichin, the way it's in the brain of the person. Says the Rebbe, Eino mislabeshet b'levush sak de klipa, is never trapped in a sack-like garment of klipa. Now, what is the metaphor of a sack again? What is the metaphor of a sack? You make a garment that's not lefi midasoch. You make an outfit that doesn't fit, so you can't move. Says the Rebbe, it's true that a Yiddish necham chochma could be in a levush taka, which is called galus, but it's only that part of the chochma which gives life to the rest, to the other 247 limbs of the body, so to speak. But the way it's in the Me'ach Sheberosh, eina mislabeshet, it cannot be enclosed b'levush zak de klipa, in this garment which is sack-like. Sack-like means I have no control of klipa. Shabalev, which is in the heart, b'chol smoli, in the left ventricle, bebechinas golus mamish, in an exiled state mamish, meaning where I lose control mamish. Raki bebechinas shina, the worst it could be is asleep. Bereshoyim, by a yid who's a rosh. And this Rabbi is the reason why we call it Ava Mesoteres. Right? Where does klipa come from? Where does evil come from? Where does, I don't want to say a goy, because a goy is klipas noiga. A goy who keeps Sheva mitzvahs is klipas noiga. An evil goy, a bad goy, where does he come from? I'll tell you in case you're uncomfortable. From the Eibishter. How does this evil goy exist? Because Hashem is makayim, machayim, mahave, this mitzias, b'chol rega v'rega. Every instant the Eibishter is making this evil presence in the world, every minute, brand new. And if the Eibishter didn't want, he would not exist in the next second. Then he keeps on creating him and keeps on creating him and continues to sustain the evil. Hashem is doing that. Yeah. What makes it klipa? What makes it klipa? Hashem is creating klipa. So if Hashem is creating klipa, that's Hashem. It's not klipa. We just finished not long ago. What's the answer? The body of that klipa, the form of that klipa, the mitzias of that klipa, cannot access the God which is sustaining it. The spark of Hashem, which is sustaining this evil klipa, is not available to the kipli, so we call it golus, and we call it levush sak. And here's the catch: you're never going to say about a goy who's a rosha that he has Ava Mesoteres. Why? There's a spark of Hashem inside of him. Why do you have Ava Mesoteres? Because it has nothing to do with him. Nothing. It doesn't, it cannot, and it never will. So why would you say it by a yid? What's the difference between a Yid who's a Rasha and a Goy who's a Rasha? By a Yid who's a Rasha, you say you should know you have an Ava, but you don't know you have your own love because it's mustard, it's covered over. So the answer is because there's a difference between a Yid and a Goy in this Nakuda. When a Goy who's a Rasha, he's Klipa and he's in Golus, and he has no Chochmah. He doesn't have Bittul, he doesn't have Chochmah, he doesn't have Ein Seif, he doesn't have life. So his state of Golus is permanent, is uncorrectable, impossible. The biggest Rasha, if he's a Yid, has a Nitzitz Eliki, has a divine spark. And that divine spark, as it exists in the brain, can never be in Golus. It can only be asleep. And because that spark, the way it's in Chochmah, can only be asleep, we say about the parts that are in Golus also Ava Meseteres. Since there is a place in the Neshama of this Yid where the Ahava, where the connection to Hashem is not Golus, in other words, I've not lost control, it's only sleeping, I therefore say about the whole Ava Meseteres, including those parts of my goof where it's a state of Golus, that I love God, is just hidden. And you wouldn't say this by a goy. And that's the Chiddush of a Yid. And to say it in simple words, the Chiddush of a Yid is that by a Yid there could be Golus. Just like by Klippa there is Golus. The meaning of the word Golus is, I'm not a Ben Choyrin, I'm an Eved, I've lost control, I'm in Mitzrayim. But by a Yid, no matter how Golus the Yid is, there is a point which is not in Golus, it's just asleep. And it can be woken up. And because it could be woken up, and basically it means it can be woken up without an outside influence, from itself, we say about the whole Holocaust of the Yid that it's in a state of Ava Meseteres. Questions or comments? So let's be plain. We're right in the middle of a shmooze. We're in the middle of a conversation. We're going to stop. Okay? This is going to sound wrong, but it's not. This was a good class. And it's a gelungen. And this is Sayata Deshmaya. This is not me. This class came out clear and Mesuder and all good Zachnya that I prepare every week. It's a gelungen. Yeah? We're stopping in the middle of a shmooze. Next week we're going to revisit it a second time. And we're going to rediscuss it. But it's going to be rediscussing. It's good to repeat. Even to this conversation that we had today. So basically we have Kedusha is Bittul Mesiras Nefesh, Chayes and Cheirus. Klipa is Yeshis and not Mesiras Nefesh, and Misa and Golos. And then we add one more thing. A Yid who's Klipa has the Klipa characteristics, but there is always a point in him which is not in Golos, it's only Shina. And that's why when it comes to a Yid, we use the expression Nava Meseteres. Ukafishi is Balakam. We're going to come back to this. Okay? If you have no questions or comments, we'll break and we'll do Hayem Yem.